Vivian Ashcroft had 30 minutes to save a stranger's life, and she did not even know the woman's name. The Grand Theater glowed with gold light that night. Crystal glasses clinked. Silk dresses moved like water across the marble floor. It was the city's most exclusive charity banquet, and Vivian was just a waitress carrying a silver tray through rooms full of people who would never remember her face. She was 25 years old, tired, and saving every tip she earned for her pharmacy licensing exam. She did not know that tonight one tray of empty glasses would change her entire life. She slipped into VIP Suite 12 to clear cups left behind by the private guests. The room was quiet, lit by a single chandelier. An elegant older woman sat alone near the window, a half-finished herbal cocktail resting beside her hand. The woman looked powerful, the kind of person who never waited in line for anything. But her face had gone pale. Then she gasped. Her hand flew to her throat. Her chest rose and fell too fast. The glass tipped over and a few drops spilled onto the white tablecloth. Vivian's training kicked in before her fear could stop her. She rushed forward and caught the woman before she slid out of her chair. "Someone call an ambulance," a nearby guest shouted, already certain this was a heart attack. But Vivian was not looking at the woman's chest. She was looking at the spilled liquid on the tablecloth. Small white petals floated in it, crushed and nearly invisible unless you knew exactly what to search for. Oleander. A deadly plant disguised as decoration, capable of stopping a human heart within the hour. This was not a heart attack. This was poison. "Ma'am, stay with me," Vivian whispered, lowering the woman gently to the floor. "Tell me your name." The woman's lips trembled. Her eyes were losing focus, but she fought to stay conscious for one more breath. She reached up and grabbed Vivian's wrist with surprising strength. "Call Cashin," she breathed. Then her eyes rolled back. Vivian did not know who Cashin was. She did not know that the name belonged to one of the most feared men in the entire city. She only knew that a stranger's life was draining away in her arms, and somewhere out there, someone needed to hear this woman's name before it was too late. She grabbed the woman's phone from the table, found the most recent contact and pressed call with shaking fingers. The line connected on the second ring. Across the city, in a private meeting room above his nightclub, Cashin Vescari sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by men who feared him more than they feared the police. He was 32 years old, sharp-eyed, and used to controlling every detail of his world. When his mother's phone lit up his screen instead of her face calling, something cold moved through his chest. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice flat and dangerous. "My name is Vivian. I'm a waitress at the Grand Theater. Your mother is dying and you need to listen to me right now." For one terrible second, Cashin's mind went somewhere dark. A stranger calling from his mother's phone, claiming she was dying. He had buried enough enemies to know exactly how this kind of trick worked. "If you hurt her," he said, standing so fast his chair crashed backward, "I will make sure no one ever finds what's left of you." "I didn't hurt her. I'm trying to save her." Vivian's voice did not shake, even though her hands were trembling against the woman's pulse. She drank something with crushed oleander in it. Her heart rate is climbing, her pupils are dilated, and she's losing consciousness. If paramedics give her standard heart medication, it could kill her faster. She needs activated charcoal and a very specific antidote, and she needs it now. Cashin froze. No actress, no liar, no enemy trying to lure him into a trap would know details like that. The words came too fast, too precise, too real. "Don't let her swallow anything else," he ordered, already moving. "I'm on my way." He hung up and ran. By the time Cashin burst into VIP Suite 12 with his family's personal physician at his side, paramedics had already arrived, confused by symptoms that did not match a normal heart attack. Vivian was still kneeling on the floor, refusing to let anyone touch the woman until she explained exactly what she had seen. The physician examined the woman's eyes, her pulse, the faint trace of crushed petals on the tablecloth. His face went pale. "She's right," he said quietly. "It's a rare combination. If we treat this as cardiac arrest, we lose her." Working side by side, Vivian and the physician stabilized Serafina Vescari just long enough to get her into a private ambulance. Cashin watched his mother's chest rise and fall on the stretcher, and for the first time in years, fear cracked through his controlled expression. He should have thanked the waitress who saved his mother's life. Instead, he turned to his security team. "Take her," he said, nodding toward Vivian. "I want to know everything about her before sunrise." Vivian barely had time to protest before two large men in dark suits gently but firmly guided her toward a black car waiting outside. She told herself this was simply how powerful families operated, that they were grateful and cautious at the same time. She did not yet understand that Cashin Vescari trusted no one, especially not someone who appeared at the exact moment his mother was poisoned. He genuinely believed she might be part of it. The car did not take her to a hospital or to the police or even back to her apartment. It took her to one of Cashin's private office buildings downtown, a place with security cameras in every corner and guards who did not smile. Vivian sat in a cold interview room while Cashin paced in front of her, arms crossed, studying her like she was a puzzle he refused to trust. "How does a waitress know how to identify oleander poisoning in under 10 seconds? He demanded. "I have a pharmacy degree," Vivian said, meeting his eyes without flinching, even though her heart pounded against her ribs. "I'm studying for my licensing exam. I recognize plant toxins because I've spent years studying them. I didn't poison your mother, Mr. Vescari. I saved her." Something in her voice made him pause. He was not begging. He was not crying. She was simply telling the truth and daring him to disagree. He pulled up the banquet's security footage instead of answering her. Camera after camera scrolled past on the screen, until one angle showed something that made the room go silent. A figure in catering staff uniform approached Serafina's table minutes before Vivian entered the suite, switched the cocktail glass for another, and disappeared into the crowd before anyone noticed. The timestamp proved it. Vivian had arrived after the poison was already in the glass. Cashin stared at the footage, then at Vivian, and felt the ground shift beneath his certainty. He was not a suspect. She was a witness. The only person alive who had seen the poison with her own eyes and understood exactly what it was. And that meant she was now the most dangerous loose end in someone else's carefully planned murder. He should have realized it sooner. He should have protected her the moment she stepped off that phone call. But by the time he understood the danger she was in, it was already too late to stop what came next. Vivian went home that night believing the nightmare was finally over. She climbed the stairs to her small apartment, exhausted, her uniform still smelling of smoke from the chaos at the theater. She told herself she would never see Cashin Vescari again. She showered, changed into pajamas, and fell asleep with her exam notes still scattered across her bed. She woke up to the smell of real smoke. Thick, black, choking smoke poured under her apartment door. The hallway lights flickered red with alarm signals. Somewhere below, she heard glass shattering and people screaming. Vivian grabbed her phone and ran, barefoot, down 4 flights of stairs as flames climbed the walls behind her. She burst out onto the street coughing, her lungs burning, just as the building's old wiring gave way and the second floor lit up like a torch. She had narrowly escaped with her life. A black car screeched to a stop at the curb. Cashin stepped out before it had even fully stopped moving, his eyes scanning the crowd until he found her standing in the street, shaking, covered in ash. "You're alive," he said, and for one strange moment his voice cracked with something that was not just relief. "How did you know?" Vivian whispered, staring at the burning building behind her. "Because I knew someone would come for you," he said grimly. "Whoever poisoned my mother knows you saw the killer's face on camera. They're erasing every witness who can identify them. You're not safe here. You're not safe anywhere alone." Vivian wanted to argue. She wanted to say she could take care of herself, that she did not need protection from a man whose own world was built on danger. But she looked at the flames eating through her apartment building, the home where she had lived for 3 years, and she understood with cold certainty that this had never been an accident. Someone wanted her dead. She had no other choice. She accepted his protection and stepped into the car that would carry her into a world far more dangerous and far more complicated than she ever could have imagined. The Vescari estate sat behind iron gates and armed guards, a mansion of marble floors and silent hallways that felt more like a fortress than a home. Vivian spent her first nights there unable to sleep, jumping at every footstep in the hall, painfully aware that she was now living inside the world of a man other people whispered about in fear. But the longer she stayed, the more that fear began to crack. Serafina Vescari recovered slowly in a private wing of the estate, and Vivian visited her every day, partly out of medical concern and partly because she had nowhere else to be. The two women began to talk quietly at first, then more openly. Serafina was sharp, funny in a dry way Vivian had not expected, and far more tired than her powerful reputation suggested. "I should have kept Cashin away from this life," Serafina admitted one evening, watching the gardens through her window. "I let him inherit something far heavier than any son should have to carry. He pretends it does not weigh on him. It weighs on him every single day." Vivian began to see things she had not expected to see. The way Cashin quietly checked on his mother's medication schedule himself instead of leaving it to staff. The way he stood outside Vivian's guest room door some nights, never knocking, simply making sure she was safe before he allowed himself to walk away. He was not the cold, dangerous stranger from that first phone call. He was a man carrying more weight than anyone around him understood. She told herself she was only staying because it was not safe to leave. She was starting to wonder if that was the only reason anymore. One evening she found Cashin alone in the estate's library, a glass of untouched whiskey in front of him, staring at nothing. She almost turned to leave, but something about the tired set of his shoulders stopped her. "You don't have to pretend you're fine," she said, stepping inside. "Not with me." He let out a low, tired laugh. "Everyone around me needs me to be in control. My mother needs it. My men need it. The families who watch every move I make need it most of all." He looked up at her and for once his guard was completely gone. "You're the only one who's ever asked if I was fine instead of assuming I had to be." Vivian sat down across from him, close enough that the silence between them did not feel empty anymore. "Then let me ask again. Are you fine?" "No," he admitted quietly. "But I think I will be." Neither of them moved closer that night. They did not have to. Something had already shifted, quiet and certain, settling into the space between them like a promise neither one was ready to say out loud. The peace did not last. Less than a week later, Cashin received an urgent call in the middle of the night. Another powerful figure in the city's underworld had collapsed during a private gathering, gasping for breath in front of dozens of witnesses, his own private doctor completely baffled by the symptoms. Vivian was brought in within the hour, and the moment she examined the man's condition, her stomach dropped. The exact same poison. The exact same crushed white petals hidden in a drink meant to look elegant and harmless. "This isn't random," Vivian said, her voice tight. "Whoever did this to Serafina is targeting other powerful families too. This is not one attack. This is a pattern." Cashin's jaw tightened. "Then we find out who's behind it before they reach someone we can't save." From that night on, Vivian became essential to an investigation that stretched far beyond one poisoned drink. While other powerful families threw lavish parties to flaunt their wealth, Vivian and Cashin moved quietly through a different world entirely, visiting luxury restaurants with hidden supply chains, rare botanical gardens that sold toxic plants disguised as exotic flowers, and private vineyards where the right amount of money could buy silence about anything. They survived 2 attempts on their lives during that investigation. A car that tried to run them off a bridge. A masked figure who nearly cornered Vivian in a parking garage before Cashin's security team intervened. Every brush with death seemed to pull them closer together instead of pushing them apart. Late one night, exhausted after another dead end, they sat together in his car outside a closed botanical supplier, rain tapping softly against the windshield. "You didn't have to come with me tonight," Cashin said quietly. "You could have stayed at the estate where it's safe." "I didn't come because it was safe," Vivian said. "I came because I'm good at this and because someone out there is poisoning people who think they're untouchable. I want to stop them." Cashin studied her for a long moment, something unguarded crossing his face. "You're the only person who's looked at me since this started and seen something other than a target or a threat." Vivian felt her heart tighten in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Maybe that's because you're not what I expected either." Neither of them said anything else. They did not have to. Something quiet and real had settled between them, fragile but unmistakable, growing in the middle of all the danger surrounding them. It was Vivian who finally found the thread that unraveled everything. Buried in records from 3 different poisoning cases, she discovered a single connection that no one else had noticed. Every victim had recently done business with the same man. A respected billionaire named Dorian Falcone, known publicly for his charity donations and his elegant private vineyards, privately known for almost nothing at all. He's been buying failing businesses from every family that's been poisoned, Vivian said, spreading the documents across the table. While they're recovering, distracted, blaming each other for the attacks, he's quietly taking control of everything they built. Cashin's expression turned to stone. He's not just poisoning people. He's starting a war between families and profiting from the wreckage. They had found their answer. What they had not realized yet was that Dorian Falcone already knew someone was closing in on him, and he was not the kind of man who waited to be caught. Vivian was walking to her car outside the Ashcroft Pharmacy archive late one evening, her arms full of research, when a van pulled up beside her. She never even saw the second figure approach from behind. When she woke up, she was sitting in a chair inside a private greenhouse filled with rare, deadly plants she recognized immediately. Glass walls. Locked doors. And across from her, calmly pouring 2 cups of tea, sat Dorian Falcone. "You're even more impressive in person," he said pleasantly, as if they were old friends. "Do you know how rare it is to find someone who studies poison the way I do? Most people are afraid of it. You respect it. I admire that. What do you want from me?" Vivian asked, forcing her voice steady even though her pulse was racing. "I want you beside me," Dorian said simply. "Together we could understand toxins no one else on Earth has even discovered. I'm offering you a future far bigger than serving drinks at parties for people who will never remember your name." "I'll never help you hurt anyone else," Vivian said. Dorian's pleasant expression did not change, but something cold settled behind his eyes. "Then it's a shame. As I have something new. Something no doctor on this earth has ever identified before. I was hoping you would appreciate the elegance of it." He set a small vial of clear liquid in front of her. Vivian's heart slammed against her ribs. She had walked into the one room in the city where she might never walk back out. What Dorian did not know was that Vivian had left a trail behind her on purpose. Before she lost consciousness in the van, she had managed to drop a small pharmacy receipt from her coat pocket, one with the greenhouse supplier's name printed at the top, a place Cashin's team had already flagged during their investigation. Cashin found it within the hour. He arrived at the abandoned botanical research facility with his security team just as Dorian was preparing the vial. The greenhouse exploded into chaos, guards moving fast through rows of poisonous plants, shouting voices echoing off the glass walls. Cashin fought his way through Dorian's men with a desperation that surprised even himself, refusing to consider any outcome where he did not reach Vivian in time. He found her seconds before Dorian could force the vial to her lips. "Let her go," Cashin said, his voice dangerously calm. "This ends now." Dorian smiled, unbothered even as his plan collapsed around him. "It's not over. It's only delayed." He knocked over a row of chemical containers behind him, and flames began crawling up the dry plant beds with terrifying speed. In the chaos and smoke, he slipped out through a side door and vanished into the night. Cashin did not chase him. He pulled Vivian into his arms instead, pulling her away from the spreading flames, refusing to let go of her hand until they were both safely outside. She was shaking but alive. And in that moment, surrounded by sirens and smoke, Vivian realized she had never felt safer than she did standing beside him. While she recovered at the estate the following days, Vivian finally told Cashin the truth she had carried alone for years. "My mother was murdered," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "I was 16. He got sick slowly over months. Headaches. Confusion." Her hands shook. "The doctors said it was a neurological illness, something rare and untreatable. No one looked any deeper." Her voice tightened. "It was her business partner. He poisoned her with small doses of thallium for almost a year, patient enough to make it look natural. He was never convicted because not one doctor in that hospital recognized what they were looking at. Cashin sat beside her in silence, letting her finish. "That's why I studied toxicology," she said. "So no one else's mother would die because the people around her failed to see the truth in time. So no one would ever call for help and have no one understand what they were looking at." She finally looked up at him. "When your mother whispered your name, I wasn't going to let her become another case no one solved." Cashin reached for her hand, holding it gently, like something precious he never wanted to risk losing. "You didn't just save my mother's life that night," he said quietly. "You've been quietly saving people your entire life. I just happened to be lucky enough to be standing close enough to see it." For the first time since the banquet, Vivian let herself cry, not from fear but from finally being understood. Dorian Falcone was not finished. Weeks later, intelligence confirmed a peace summit had been arranged between the city's remaining powerful families, an attempt to end the suspicion and chaos his poisonings had created between them. Vivian studied the guest list, the schedule, every detail of the planned event, and felt a cold certainty settle over her. "He'll poison the ceremonial wine," she said. "It's the one moment every family will be drinking from the same source at the same time. If he eliminates enough leaders in one night, there will be no one left to stop him from taking everything." Cashin's plan moved quickly and quietly. His own people were placed among the catering staff for the summit, men and women Vivian had personally trained to recognize the telltale signs of tampering. Moments before the ceremonial toast began, every bottle on that table was swapped for one secured and tested under Vivian's direction. Dorian arrived at the summit confident his plan was already in motion, smiling through introductions, accepting compliments on his generous donations to the evening's cause. He raised his glass along with every other guest in the room, certain that this final move would end the war in his favor. Instead, security quietly intercepted the original poison bottles before they ever reached the room. Lab results confirmed exactly what Vivian had predicted. The wine carried the same rare combination of toxins used in every previous attack, and the chain of evidence led directly back to vineyards owned by Dorian Falcone. His calm expression shattered the moment Cashin's men closed in around him in front of every family leader in the city. There was no charity story left to hide behind, no elegant explanation for poison traced back to his own private vineyard. The mastermind who had spent years quietly destroying powerful families from the shadows was finally exposed in front of every person he had tried to deceive. Dorian Falcone was arrested that night, and the years of carefully hidden murders he had committed finally came to light. Months passed. The city slowly returned to something resembling peace. Serafina Vescari officially stepped down from leading the family's affairs, content to watch from a quieter distance as her son guided the Vescari name toward a future built on legitimate businesses instead of fear. Cashin worked tirelessly to close the door on the dangerous world he had inherited, determined that the people who came after him would never have to live the way his mother once had. Vivian finished her licensing exam with the highest marks in her class. Using the recognition she earned from uncovering Dorian's crimes, she opened the Ashcroft Institute of Toxicology, a place dedicated to identifying rare poisonings before they could ever be dismissed or overlooked again. She built her life's purpose into something permanent, something that would protect strangers the way she once wished someone had protected her mother. On the night of the Institute's grand opening, Vivian stood beneath the bright lights of the building she had built from nothing, surrounded by doctors, researchers, and former waitresses who once doubted a path like this was even possible for them. Cashin stood quietly beside her, watching her with the kind of pride that needed no words. "You did this," he said softly. "All of it." Vivian looked out at the crowd, then up at him, remembering the desperate phone call that had started everything, the night she had no idea she was about to change 2 lives forever. "We did this," she said, slipping her hand into his. Answering one desperate phone call had not just saved a dying woman in a quiet VIP suite. It had ended a hidden war fought in silence between the most dangerous families in the city, and it had given Vivian Ashcroft something she never expected to find in the middle of all that danger. It had given her a future, and it had given her him. Thank you for watching.